Millions of fans wept as guitar legend Eddie Van Halen passed away, but very few people knew that his final years were a miniature hell behind locked studio doors. From long nights immersed in substances to an extreme fear of physical collapse, the life of the greatest guitar player in history always concealed the darkest corners. Now, as his son officially turns 35 and breaks his long-standing silence,
Still be very proud. But considering everything I'm doing now and everything he saw before he left, he was super proud. And I just wish I could show him this album. I know he.
the entire curtain covering the dark side of a legend is officially revealed. In 1962, the family of Eddie Van Halen decided to leave Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, to immigrate to a new land, officially setting foot in the city of Pasadena, in the state of California, USA. This relocation milestone opened an entirely new chapter, simultaneously igniting the flame of artistic passion within the soul of a genius but extremely quiet boy. Starting his musical journey with strict classical piano lessons required by his family from the age of 6, Eddie early on trained a sharp ear along with comprehensive sound comprehension. The restriction of formulaic sheet music quickly gave way to a craving for unconventional freedom. When his older brother Alex began practicing instruments, both brothers quickly shifted toward drums and guitar, self-teaching themselves to explore the world of sound in their own distinct way. Unlike the majority of contemporary artists who underwent formal schooling, Eddie was entirely self-taught through innate instinct and extraordinary acuity. Spending many hours sitting diligently by the edge of his bed with his guitar, he experimented with every possible sound without caring about dry theoretical norms. Looking back on that independent journey, he once expressed his true thoughts on the pages of Guitar World magazine. "I am not a rock star in the literal sense. I never cared for fame or flashy glory. The only thing that keeps me tied to the profession is because I genuinely enjoy playing the guitar." This spirit of freedom, refusing to submit to any template, created the premise for Eddie to execute a shocking revolution in the world music scene. He birthed and perfected the two-handed technique on the fretboard, known to professionals as the tapping technique. Instead of using the usual string-plucking method, Eddie skillfully utilized both hands to glide rapidly across the fretboard, producing cascading sharp and magical melodic sequences. The solo named Eruption in the debut album bearing the band's name Van Halen, officially released in 1978, was the unyielding proof of this great turning point. The work immediately shattered all guitar technical limits of that era, turning an unknown young artist into a new monument in the hearts of global fans. Not stopping at performing on major stages, Eddie also demonstrated a divergent creative mindset by crafting the legendary Frankenstrat guitar with his own hands. He bought scattered cheap components himself, used scissors to cut the pickguard, and taped it by hand to create striped paint bearing an exclusive imprint. To him, musical instruments were not merely tools of labor, but a part of the body that needed to be shaped to serve personal emotions to the maximum. That unconventional mindset continued to extend far beyond the framework of the band, when in 1982 he accepted the invitation to record the guitar solo for Michael Jackson's super hit Beat It, after just a few minutes of impromptu recording. This bold combination successfully erased the inherent boundaries between mainstream pop music and edgy rock music. Even so, that extreme perfectionism, alongside the pressure to maintain peak fame, drove Eddie away from the stage lights, confining himself into an isolated space to face unrevealed internal storms. Studio darkness. In 1984, the resounding explosion of the album, named 1984, along with the chart-topping single Jump, pushed the band Van Halen to touch the peak of dazzling glory in their career. Even so, behind the dazzling stage lights and unceasing cheers, internal cracks began to silently deepen. Irreconcilable differences in artistic vision, between Eddie Van Halen and lead singer David Lee Roth pushed their relationship into a dead end. The huge egos of two exceptional personalities continuously clashed fiercely, turning every practice session into a high-pressure battlefield. The conflict officially came to an end in 1985, when David Lee Roth decided to leave the band to develop a solo career, leaving behind a gigantic void and pushing the entire band to the brink of dissolution. Amidst the surrounding chaos, Eddie made a bold decision aimed at reclaiming absolute control over his artistic products. He invested in building an enclosed private studio named 5150, located in Studio City, California, completed in the mid-1980s. This was not merely a recording venue, but was also regarded as a fortified fortress, helping Eddie separate himself completely from commercial interference by major record companies. In this independent space, he freely experimented with every divergent sound idea, according to his own strict standards. Sharing about the reason for creating this autonomous space in Rolling Stone magazine, Eddie once confessed sincerely, "I wanted to have a place belonging solely to myself, where music is born from original inspiration instead of being subjected to the governance of cold commercial numbers." The birth of the 5150 studio also marked a new chapter, when the band welcomed new vocalist Sammy Hagar to join in 1985, bringing fresh energy, helping maintain the chart-dominating position through the album 5150. Although achieving astonishing commercial accomplishments, the vortex of internal instabilities never truly closed. The immense pressure from having to continuously surpass his own shadow turned each comeback into a heavy psychological burden resting upon Eddie's shoulders. Extreme perfectionism inside the studio caused him to incessantly force himself to work until exhaustion. Entering the late 1980s, the isolation inside the fortified walls of the 5150 studio became increasingly profound. Eddie had to face complex psychological storms where genius creativity always went hand in hand with internal darkness. Explosive rock songs could not cover up the emptiness and loneliness of an artist self-gnawing on emotional wounds created by his own perfectionism. While those close to him began noticing signs of physical and mental exhaustion in him, Eddie still resolutely hid behind the strong facade of a living monument in international rock music. Internal conditions continued to undergo violent fluctuations entering the early 1990s, the time when the world music current shifted strongly toward the alternative rock movement. Van Halen once again struggled to find a foothold in a fiercely competitive market. Even so, just as the harsh whirlpool of fame seemed about to completely envelop a heavily wounded soul, a gentle and fateful turning point appeared, preparing to reveal an entirely different aspect behind the facade of a rock legend. A father's anchor. In March 1991, an entirely new and profound milestone officially altered the life trajectory of Eddie Van Halen when his cherished firstborn son was born in Santa Monica, California. The union between him and famous actress Valerie Bertinelli, a universally beloved face, through her role in the television series One Day at a Time, seemingly brought a peaceful harbor amidst the turbulent and stormy current of daily life. The newborn son was christened with the baptismal name Wolfgang William Van Halen, featuring a distinctive middle name directly inspired by the timeless genius composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. This deliberate decision not only demonstrated Eddie's profound admiration for classical art forms, but also embedded the strong expectation that music would permanently become the defining bloodline identity of the family. That sacred and unconditional paternal affection was once portrayed fully and delicately through the mesmerizing instrumental track numbered 316, located inside the hit album For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, serving as a profoundly special spiritual gift that Eddie dedicated to his tiny son right at the very beginning of his earliest life steps. In complete contrast to the image of an explosive, edgy, and fervent freak on the rock stage. When returning to the family space, Eddie transformed into an extremely gentle, patient, and compassionate father. He did not impose or force his son to walk along strict framework paths, instead letting everything happen most naturally according to the call of curiosity. When Wolfgang expressed his love for rhythms from his early childhood years, Eddie silently fueled it by creating the most favorable conditions possible. From afternoon sessions recording crude cassette tapes with his son, to the milestone of gifting a real drum set. When the boy turned 10 years old, the private studio gradually became a special bonding space between two generations, where they shared a single common language through pure beats and sounds. Even so, the warm light from the family hearth was still not enough to completely dispel the simmering cracks nurtured from the burden of fame and erratic living habits prolonged from the past. Dense touring schedules combined with the pressure of preserving peak status created an invisible gap between Eddie and his wife, Valerie. Psychological pressures gradually grew over the years, turning family life into a major challenge. Opening up about this challenging phase in People magazine, Valerie Bertinelli once shared, "Emotionally, we walked through the brightest years of our youth together, but the weight of fame and personal hidden corners ultimately pushed two human beings far apart, even though deep feelings never faded away." Compressed pressure ultimately led to the conclusion when the couple decided to officially separate in 2001, closing a love chapter that consumed no small amount of international media ink. Although the marriage shattered, a solid connecting thread named Wolfgang was still maintained between them. Even so, as emotional wounds just receded into the past, a more cruel challenge from the physical body itself began knocking, threatening to take away everything. Amidst failing health and surrounding illness, darkness, a bold and controversial decision was about to be made, dragging the teenager straight into the storm center of stage lights. The final stage beside his son. In 2002, the career structure and physical condition of Eddie Van Halen suffered a major shock when medical records recorded a diagnosis of throat cancer. Treatment protocols required surgical intervention to remove a part of the tongue, combined with complex complications in the hip joints, demanding multiple replacement surgeries and prolonged rehabilitation. Physical exhaustion, compounded by heavy medical treatments, forced the artist to narrow public activities, completely ending media interviews and retreating into the strictly controlled space of the private studio in Studio City. This isolated state persisted amidst chronic pain and psychological pressures from the past, weighing heavily upon one of the greatest guitar symbols of the century. By 2006, a landmark personnel structure change took place within the internal ranks of Van Halen when Eddie decided to bring his son Wolfgang Van Halen, then only 15 years old, to assume the bass player position, replacing veteran member Michael Anthony. This move immediately triggered a wave of public controversy across media channels and global music professional forums. Loyal fan groups and critics raised accusations of bloodline favoritism in allocating key member positions, pushing the teenager into the center of harsh public opinion pressure and close scrutiny from the public. Regardless of mixed reactions from the market, the decision to restructure the starting lineup stemmed from Eddie's own personal needs to re-establish a solid backstage connection during the prolonged medical treatment period. Subsequent international tours were deployed under strict medical supervision dedicated to Eddie, wherein Wolfgang's presence played the role of a psychological and physical stabilizing factor on the touring road. Backstage data confirmed shared living schedules, including traveling by private vehicle, continuous music practice coordination, sharing backstage space, and maintaining performances lasting many hours in front of tens of thousands of audience members, regardless of fatigue signs stemming from pathology. This cooperative model shaped a closed but highly productive operational period for the band throughout major touring campaigns across North America and international markets. Regarding this cooperative drive, official statements recorded in Guitar Player magazine clearly reflected the technical perspective and personal emotion of Eddie Van Halen toward his son's presence on stage. Being able to share performance space and creative space with my son is the decisive factor, helping maintain my entire physical and mental stamina through the harshest medical treatments. Through prolonged practice sessions inside the private studio, Eddie directly transmitted sound control standards, analog equipment operating methods, and low-frequency processing techniques on the bass to Wolfgang, establishing a direct professional knowledge transfer process from the founder to the succeeding generation. The process of accumulating musical material throughout the 2000s reached its completion milestone in 2012 via the release of a studio album named A Different Kind of Truth. This was the first official record project of Van Halen containing entirely new compositions after a prolonged interruption period of 14 years since the album Van Halen III. The resounding success of this album officially affirmed Wolfgang's true talent, crushing all suspicions regarding kinship factors and marking the final peak collaborative milestone between father and son in the professional music market. Even so, hidden deep behind the glory of that record was a harsh reality. Eddie Van Halen's physical strength was gradually exhausting under the erosion of a monstrous disease. When the final melodies temporarily closed inside the 5150 studio space, a fierce chapter of life, silent life and death moments, and the journey of preserving a great legacy were about to be unveiled. The eternal legacy of a legend. Entering the post-2012 period, Eddie Van Halen found belated stability in his personal life after his second marriage to Janie Laevsky. The new wife established a discreet and quiet living environment, helping the artist limit commercial media distractions to the maximum. Nevertheless, the throat cancer medical condition continued to recur with metastasis cycles, forcing Eddie to maintain a strict medical treatment schedule at specialized facilities in Los Angeles. Regardless of physical decline, the private studio space continued to operate with high intensity as a storage center for the final sound ideas of the founder. In the final years of his life, Eddie devoted all his time to recording demo tracks, guitar riffs, and silent harmonies, with the absolute belief that this data treasure would be safely transferred to his son, Wolfgang. Archived materials from the studio recorded hundreds of hard drives containing unreleased compositions, marking an urgent race against time by a music icon before physical strength completely ran out. Sharing about this diligent composition phase in Rolling Stone magazine, Eddie once described the studio space as the sole boundary where he completely mastered his destiny. This place has no illness, no outside pressure, just sound and endless experiments that I want to leave for the next generation. The final medical tragedy occurred in the autumn of 2020. Following a series of severe pulmonary complications and strokes, Eddie Van Halen officially passed away on October 6, 2020, at Providence St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 65. Medical reports and family announcements confirmed that in the final hours of existence, Wolfgang Van Halen and ex-wife Valerie Bertinelli stayed by the hospital bedside, tightly holding the artist's hand as he took his final breath. The departure of one of the greatest guitar monuments in modern history triggered a global memorial wave from the artist community and millions of fans across the world. Funeral rituals were organized in a private format, strictly complying with family wishes. Eddie's ashes were handed over entirely to Wolfgang, who later performed the ritual of scattering his father's ashes off the coast of Malibu, where Eddie used to spend most of his living time seeking peace in his soul. Receiving this spiritual legacy not only carried bloodline symbolism, but also posed the pressure to restructure the entire future of music for the son at adult age. Instead of adopting commercial strategies based on the old name of the band, Wolfgang chose the independent establishment path, through a solo project named Mammoth WVH. Clarifying personal views and the pain of loss in media interviews, Wolfgang delivered a direct statement. Writing music is a huge mental therapy for me, helping me overcome things that words or anything else cannot do. That is a big reason why I never want to play Van Halen songs again, because I just want to play with my dad, and Dad is no longer here to play together. This move received backing from Uncle Alex Van Halen, co-founding member of the band who maintained a close advisory relationship with Wolfgang in preserving the family tape treasure at 5150. At age 35, through commercially successful studio albums like Mammoth WVH, Wolfgang completed the status transition from an heir bearing heavy public pressure into an independent core artist. Eddie Van Halen's legacy, therefore, was not buried in the past or commercialized through superficial tribute programs, but continued to endure through strict technical standards and artistic integrity, maintained by the very son whom he once personally guided into the studio from early youth. Eddie Van Halen's grand journey closed, leaving behind not only revolutionary innovations for world music, but also an emotional story about salvation and family affection. Although storms have passed and that rock monument of those days has permanently transformed into melodies, his legacy continues to endure through every autonomous note that his son, now at age 35, is proudly preserving and continuing to write. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching the video. Do not forget to hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel to accompany us in upcoming stories about world music legends.